So we will be chatting all about career paths with three really incredible leaders today. Stoked to have Eliane Tozman joining us. She's the head of design at IBM Canada for their innovation and design strategy team. Michael Sacca, VP of product at Dribbble, and Maria Pereda, director of product design at Roadmunk. Also excited because we've hosted all three of them at different DesignX events in the past. So it's going to be just a friendly conversation sitting at a coffee shop. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you. So I know I just gave a very extremely sneak peek into what you do, of course, just by the title alone. So it would be amazing to get started with a round of introductions. Also, just check in how everyone is doing. So, Eliane, you want to start first?
Sure. So my name is Eliane Tozman, and I work out of the Toronto IBM office. And I work with the IBM Design, Innovation and Strategy team, which is located downtown. And I also work for the IBM Garage as a design strategist. So I kind of go into those two roles. And I've been on and off with IBM for the last 20 years, playing different roles within the organization, as well as starting my own stuff too. So it's been an interesting journey.
That's definitely sounds really, really exciting, and you're doing well, trying to keep up with everything that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The best part of this whole thing is the fact that I don't have to travel. I don't have to get out of space. I can stay home. I can actually garden. It's like, wow,
that's pretty nice.
Yeah. It's like a whole. I kind of like it. There's a lot of positive to it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And Michael joining us from West Coast.
Yeah, right outside Vancouver. I'm the VP of product at Dribbble. I've been in this role for about the last year. Before that, I was running our strategy and sales team here at Dribbble. And yet we're already remote. So this has been kind of business as usual in terms of work. And so I've been working remote for about the last 6 years with Crew and now Dribbble. That's
incredible. Are you like just looking at other folks and be like, oh, now you understand,
We've actually had a lot of people reach out, just looking for tips, doing private seminars with larger organizations who are now forced to be remote. So, I think it's really good. I think it's way the industry is leading anyway. And so I think it's good for more people to experience it. Even if we do go back to offices in 6 months, I think it's a great opportunity for some companies to consider remote.
Absolutely. And last but not the least, our friend in Toronto, Maria Pereda.
Yeah, that's me. So I've known Preet through 3 jobs now. Every time he introduces me, I work at a different job. But I've been working at Roadmunk since October. It's a startup, scale up, I don't know. I guess a stable startup that is already profitable, whatever you want to call that. But I've been leading design there. And so far, it's been a very rewarding experience. Fun fact, when I met Preet, I was working remote, and I left that job because I was tired of being remote. And here I am again, being forced to be remote.
That's true. But I think there's also, something about, I think, because in the job that you're referring to, the company was in New York, you were working from Toronto, and now it's like much more democratized because everyone has to work remote.
Sort of. I mean, working remote during a pandemic is not the same as working remote, having to deal with distance learning and hearing the teacher call my children and I don't know where they are and I have to go find them and all those fun things. It's definitely an added challenge.
I can totally imagine. And, all three of you being parents, really appreciate that you took out the time today, to still be part of this conversation. And we would absolutely, I think, the opposite, not trouble, but in fact, love if we accidentally, some sneak peeks come in, someone comes in to say hi. That would be amazing.
Possible.
Yeah. for everyone that's watching the live stream on Swapcard, if you have questions, please do keep sharing them through the chat. I will try my best to include them as we have this conversation, and not have them all kind of piled up towards the end. So how the whole panel discussion of this conversation will be structured is around three main pillars. So because we are looking at career paths, so it's almost like you're looking at the beginning, from where all of you started, getting your foot in the door, your education, and kind of kicking off your career path, whether it be in design or product. Then kind of the whole messy middle, the meaty part, right? Where it just seems like, oh, you started in, arts, but now you're the VP of product. But it's like, yeah, there was a lot in between. And then where you are currently now, right? So how you're tackling the leadership journey, how that started. So just so it gives everyone a little bit of context for those watching the conversation. So a good part about doing this remote is that I can also have everyone's LinkedIn profiles open, helps me. I don't have to memorize the career paths or the notes, which definitely can be really, really helpful. So when I was, again, doing my research, and Maria, you could correct me if I'm wrong. So I saw that, Eliane and Michael both had some form of education in arts before they kickstarted their career paths. But you, at least your LinkedIn tells me that you went to study business first.
I did. So I'm from Spain, and my parents dictated what I was going to study in school, and that was going to be business because that's what you do. So I studied business, and then when I finished university, I said, hey, I'm going to see what America is about. So I packed up my suitcases, didn't have anything, and I went to see what New York was about. And I met some friends there, and one of them was this Spanish woman that worked. She was an information architect. She was like, hey, this thing is fantastic. I think you could be good at it. I just got this project in Citibank where they are redoing, like they're moving all these 30 applications into one new application, and nobody's an information architect. So with your business background and a little bit of charm, I can get you in. And honestly, that's how I started my career. I went to talk to this man that I'm still very grateful for, that I conned into hiring me. His name was Amir Khan. And he hired me as a hybrid interactive designer business analyst. And that's exactly how I started my career. He was like, I'm going to hire you at like poverty line, and poverty line in New York City is very hard, let me tell you. He was like, if things work out, we can discuss next year. And I did a lot of self-learning, and I went to a lot of conferences, and I read books, and I did a lot of like free projects. And that was my beginning.
Right. So it was definitely, from what you're sharing, like not the the usual way that many expect.
It was an accidental path. I can still remember talking at a coffee shop and learning about this fun thing.
Right. It sounds really good though. Interactive design and business analyst is like that's an incredible first job to have.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds really interesting. And Michael, you were designing WordPress websites in the beginning, again, from what LinkedIn gave me a sneak peek of.
WordPress is generous. We're actually doing credit repair sites, which is pretty much the lowest of the low there. But yeah, that's where I started. My roommate was working in credit repair as an engineer, and so I was just taking his overflow work, and just to teach myself CSS, design, the whole bit. Definitely some of the worst work I ever did, but you got to start somewhere, and so
right?
that's where I started teaching myself. I went to school for music, and moved out to LA to realize that nobody cared if you had a music and business degree, because no one in the music industry does. And so I was just working at restaurants and just trying to survive. I finally ended up picking up HTML, CSS, and started freelancing that way. Eventually building a small agency that we ran for about 5 years, where I you start off to do the work that you like, right? All the design work, all the development work, and I end up just doing sales for the agency. And so that's why I learned how to sell. I learned how to market. And that's when I moved over to Crew to run their partnerships and kind of expand that skill set. I think it's incredibly important to understand the business side of what we're building. And so that was been an invaluable experience. I led the acquisition of Crew into Dribbble. And then at Dribbble, I ran our sales, marketing, and strategy team for the first 2 or 3 years, and then moved over into the product side in the last year.
Amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, I love the I love the transition, from all the way from music and then to of course, business, and again seeing the common thread of self-teaching yourself between Maria and yourself, and just
business background
and business background. Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of my segue to Eliane, which was like both of you had that overlap between coming from business backgrounds and then taking design, and so going deep into that. And Eliane, you went to school for design specifically, and then was kind of the formative years spent more on the design part and then stretching into the business, or how did it all start?
It was really interesting. So I did, when you finish high school, you're like, what am I going to do? You're kind of lost, and you're like, okay, I got to go to. And I grew up in Montreal, so I had to go to CEGEP, and I'm like, CEGEP. And my whole family, they're like, on my mother's side, they're all academics. So I'm like, biting my, I'm like, I'm going to go in the arts. And I decided to do design. It was like completely okay. I'm going to choose that one. It was really haphazard, and I ended up really liking it. And then I went on to university to do a degree in communication semiotics. And I fell in love with this book called Computers as Theater. And I just love this book, and I love this woman who wrote it. And I said, oh my God, I want to merge design with technology. And so that's how it kind of all worked. I became like really fascinated in it, and I wanted to like go on and like go to MIT. I had my whole dream, right? And then of course reality sits in. You're like, I can't afford MIT. So I ended up starting working in a robotics, doing their user experience in Montreal, optimal robotics. And they were way ahead of the curve. And then I decided, actually I didn't decide, it's just life took me to Toronto. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I applied for a job. And I didn't really have any experience. I was like, what am I going to do? I had like these, this like mishmash of everything. And so then I got this job as a contractor, and then I got another job at IBM, and I kind of like just, made my way. And then I would get bored, and I would like do other stuff within the company, because you can grow. It's like you either grow where you go from job to job, right? Yep. Small companies, and you can really grow like that and expand. I decided to actually grow within my career within the same company, to really kind of look at it differently. To do I'm going to do the opposite as my family, right? So, they kind of, my mother was a little, she wore these big beads, and she was a crazy artist. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I decided to kind of hide myself in this, in a big organization, literally. I kind of did a whole bunch of stuff. I led an international team that was all over the world of designers working on products. And then I, really looking at the business side as well, but learning it through the job. And then I fell in love with design thinking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can use this in ways that is unbelievable. I can work with small companies, with large companies, and kind of using that design mindset to kind of disrupt and accelerate businesses. So
right. Incredible. That's amazing. So it's there is this underlying thread. Whoop, knocked off my mic. There's this underlying thread between everything that all three of you shared about the formative initial years when you were just kicking off your career paths. And all three of you spoke about like different ways or different kind of platforms or channels you went to for learning, right? So you got into that book, or you just, started learning online and trying to find resources, or just by even like, talking yourself into a role that you were like not sure about, but you're like, I'm going to go in and learn about it. And that's also because at that time, not that I'm,
we all.
I was looking for a polite way to frame that and include myself in that conversation, Maria.
I'm hiding my hair. So you don't see all the grays,
I have a streak of gray here.
I put makeup on, so I'm
You look gorgeous.
Yeah. For that, Maria. So earlier we did, because the whole field, many of these labels did not exist around, UX and product design and all those things. And we were still kind of discovering what this whole mishmash of things that we are doing is called. Whereas if you compare it to today, right, there is an extreme amount of content, resources, places, educational institutions that you can go to of all formats and sizes. And I don't know, I being a civil engineer myself, so I kind of had a more relatable experience with, the three of you, which was all about leaving, what I went to school for, at least in my case. And then just, I built WordPress websites in the beginning just to kind of like learn CSS, HTML, and try to do other hacks, and kind of self-taught myself. And so when you look at quite a few of those who are getting into design today, and this is just a perception or an observation, you can say, which is that it almost seems like everything is, a little, I don't know if cookie cutter is the right word, but it's like, okay, there are these blocks lying here of information. If you just consume them, you will fit into this frame. Whereas for many of us, it was like, you're kind of just carving your way by learning and picking up. And so now that all three of you are also in roles where, even if you're not directly hiring, that you're informing hiring, you're working with stakeholders that are closely hiring designers. Do you kind of like see any kind of advantages or disadvantages to the opportunities that the current folks trying to enter design have around them?
I almost feel it is a disadvantage. Like sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh, it would be terrifying to start right now. There's such an overabundance of information and it's become so popular and everybody wants to be a designer, which is great. It's so great that design has risen to this level but also there is such an overabundance of information and everybody has an opinion and there's all these medium pieces and there's all this misinformation and everybody thinks that things should be this way and everybody fancies themselves an expert. And I think that I think it's just really hard out there for anybody starting in this field. Like back in the day, I do sound like an old because it was a new field and it was, there was demand, not as much as today, but if you went to the banks and to some of these bigger companies, like there was a demand and they needed you and you knew to do this magic that nobody knew how to do. And there were few resources, but the few resources all kind of said the same. And you talk to your friends in the industry. And I think it was almost easier. But today it's like you tell somebody this and they're like, no, but I read this other thing in this other place. And then I talked to this other person and then my portfolio says this, but I went to this boot camp and they told me this thing, but then I read this other thing and this podcast. And it's just like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Good luck.
So what would you, like Michael or Eliane, like, Maria touched upon quite a few facets of, the certain aspects of current reality. Like as someone who's starting, what do you do? Like, yes, it is quite a few folks are trying to enter the field. How do you navigate that?
Well, I think you need to, oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I think it's deciding where you want to go. There's a lot more options, right? Each industry is specific. And then what do you want to do, right? So when we started just a couple of years ago, we didn't even have a UX, UI differentiation, right? So you kind of had to do everything. Web designers would do mobile. And it was just design, right? You were a designer, you were expected to do everything from the experience all the way through. Now there are actual specialties within. And I do agree the hardest part is finding good information. Because we do have a very cluttered and noisy climate now of influencers who are, have 3 years experience, but yet are incredibly entertaining, right? And
Yeah.
some of the advice is good, some of it's terrible, and it's hard to know at the beginning what is that good advice. Now, there's a lot more of it, so there is an advantage of that. The wealth of content is available that wasn't available then. I mean, when I was coming up to learn more of the business side, I started a podcast on product, right? To start to interview people. And through those interviews, you start to suss out the patterns of what works, the patterns of who you want to emulate and what you don't, right? Neither is right or wrong. And I think that's also important. But you do have a lot more choice. And I think deciphering what resonates with you is probably harder today, but there is more available to find the path that is right for you. I do think we are at a bit of a dearth of that industry expertise that our colleges used to provide, right? Where they were the trusted institution and they would kind of start to mold the best practices. We're missing that today. We don't necessarily have that anywhere. It's probably a hole for someone to fill. And I think that's probably part of the struggle of being a young designer today.
Yeah, I think so too. And I find that it's indicative of the times too, this whole plethora of information. I mean, every industry has that. No matter, even if you want to become a nurse, right? There's different practices. I think that is not just a design problem. I think it's a global problem. So many industries have that. And I think with design, what you're seeing now, which is really interesting, is you're seeing these boot camps almost where you go into school, you learn design in 4 weeks, and then bang, you're out into the, you're eligible to get a job. And there is, the good news is that on another hand, is that now design is front and center. It has a seat in the room. Every single organization is so design oriented. So that is kind of the good news if you want to start, is that, when we started, it was very restrictive. I mean, if I look at IBM, I started, there was maybe 300 worldwide designers. Now there's like 4,000 designers. So what does that tell you? That tells you that design is really so important in our, in our industry, in our world today, as with this overloading of information. So I think that it is scary, but I think that there is, so much opportunity as well. And there is also, very concentrated disciplines. When I started, I was a design researcher. Do you think I ever did design research? Absolutely not. Just because you have to be like, know everything, really. And today you don't. You have that opportunity. If you really want to focus on something that you're so passionate about, you can actually do that. And that's a wonderful opportunity for people who are just starting out. And if you really believe in it and you have a passion, I think that applies to anything, any industry. If you're really passionate about it, I think and it shows and it comes across, and someone sees that who they're hiring, I think, wow, that's amazing. I mean, I've, throughout my career, I've seen good designers, bad designers in between, but the people that really have that passion, that love for it, it shines through. And I think that is something that's really important. And I think that transcends time. You've seen that over and over again.
I agree with that. You made a comment though about like the nurses and the specialties. Yes, but at the end, like if you go to Ontario and you want to be a nurse, there's like specific minimum criteria that has been widely accepted. And then you're talking about these boot camps. There's all these boot camps and they promise you something, but there's no widely accepted criteria on what it means to be a designer. And that's where I'm going back about the information.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to chastise all boot camps because I haven't been personally to each one of them, so I can't give you my opinion, but
I don't know either. I'm just
how
saying
do you know? No,
Yeah.
I know, but how do you know the quality and how do you know that you're ready? Like what I find, and maybe it's my bias because of my background, is that a lot of people that come out of boot camps are missing that business savvy layer, and they have learned a cookie cutter formula of now I do this, now I do this, now I do these, rather than, okay, if I'm solving a business problem and I also have to take into consideration these other elements, how do I apply certain things I've learned to actually solve these rather than just go through the motions I learned?
You ask Google.
Yes. Let me ask Google that.
Hey, Google.
Yeah.
She's gonna
It's always
respond.
handy.
I've got to be careful.
So I think Michael also made that comment. I do think there's a void to be filled, and hopefully we'll get to a point that being a designer, there's like a minimum criteria.
Yeah, we suffer from that medium effect, and I found this through interviewing folks, is that talking to people in the industry that are actually working, there's so many more concerns than you find in free available content online, and so medium articles and the reason people are promoting themselves is for their own gain, right? Not necessarily to give the best advice back. And oftentimes that is by either early founders or, people with time too. But what I found is that once you move up, your time is more limited. And so you don't have time to always give back in that meaningful way. Although mentorship is something that I believe a lot of us do. But that is a very personal one-to-one. And the advantage of that is not self-promotion, but it's the satisfaction of having a direct effect on someone's career and growth. And so I think as much free content and that consumption is valuable to a certain point, there needs to be a human contact and someone that you look to for that advice, and that you're getting the more personalized advice to what your individual situation is. Which is incredibly invaluable. When you're at a company, you get that through management and leadership, right? You have people to lean on, hopefully, right? In the ideal scenario. But if you don't, what I have seen is when people are in that situation where they don't feel like they're being fulfilled either in the job or they're in between roles and are really looking for that transition, is looking for that mentor outside of their immediate sphere of influence, can really help to answer some of those deeper questions and really find out what are companies concerned about, what are they looking for, what skills do they need, and what's important in hiring, and where they need to grow. So I do think that the boot camps are great. I haven't gone through one. I can't speak to always the quality, but I think it only takes you so far to being a hireable and productive designer internally.
Right.
It's really interesting that you just said that, because it's funny, because if you look back at your own progression, I'm sure everyone always remembers that one teacher, right? In grade school and high school, whatever it may be, or university, that one teacher that made everything, that made such a fundamental difference. I remember it was my grade 3 teacher, Mrs. Bernstein. I'll never forget her. You know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. That was so true, that you need that, you need someone to kind of have that relationship to really make a difference.
Yeah. And it changed, right? It changes throughout time. I remember when we were going through the acquisition, I leaned on our investors heavily for their advice, and even like Ben Leonard, who runs design at Microsoft now, but was previously at Wunderlist, and just leaning on him. And it was a very personal relationship there, right? That no one would know about publicly, but they were kind enough to lend their time when I really needed the help, and I was really in over my head in a new situation.
To just add to that conversation, there's actually a question in our chat, which is how does someone that is still early in their careers, how do you even go about finding mentors? Because as Michael said, like, it is incredibly powerful to have that the mentorship and support in your early stages. So how does someone who doesn't have a lot of kind of immediate network?
So I can answer if. Sure. So I think the first thing is to have a problem to solve, right? I do get reached out by a number of people just looking for mentorship, but I don't always know what problem that they have. Am I the right person for that? So the most effective I've seen are people that build informal mentorship. I think Helen Tran had a great tweet about this yesterday even. But it really about asking questions, having a problem to solve, and then following up. And when someone gives you that advice, implementing that advice and following up with the action steps is a great way to start to build a cadence for that relationship. It's not necessarily calling someone up and say, hey, will you be my mentor? But it is being a good student when someone is willing to give you that advice, and giving them also the satisfaction. I've had a lot of people that I'll spend an hour or two with, never hear from them again. Maybe my advice was garbage, but either way, it doesn't build that cadence of a follow up a month or two later, hearing, hey, I tried it, didn't work, or I tried it and it did work. Here's where I am today. Those steps really make taking that next phone call and really building an actual mentor relationship essential.
I do agree with the goal. I participated in a mentorship program, and once wasn't successful. The other time it was very successful. And I think when it wasn't successful, it's because there was no clear goals to this mentorship. And I was like, I don't know how to help you. And we would sit and talk, but if there's nothing to solve specifically, we're just chatting. I mean, I can give you advice, but I don't know if my advice is that great or that's what you need. Right. So having a clear goal or specific of what you want out of this relationship is really, really essential.
Right, I have it. My kid is outside giving me hand gestures. Literally running around with his pajamas on. I'm like, dude, you can't do that. He's running on the sidewalk. Sorry. I agree. Yes, fine. I agree. I think so. Also, you kind of mentorships is very interesting. So you have to have an affinity, right? If you find someone, or you've listened to them, or you've come across someone that you really like, or you just, there's something there, then you reach out to that person, right? Don't just reach out. I think there's the mentorship. There's a problem that everyone is like, oh, you can be my mentor, or you can be my mentor, just because they have a big name. I mean, that's not, I don't think it's the way that just, even that person is not known or doesn't, but you've heard them talk, or you've just come across them in some, way, get that advice. It's amazing how anyone, and how beautiful it is, right? It doesn't have to be that, that teacher or whatever. It could be someone that you just come across in life.
That's right.
And it's very interesting, especially if you have a kid that's still running around with the demo.
Very true. Yeah. And but just to kind of close on that thought, I think all three of you are gonna get a lot of LinkedIn requests after the session today. And I think much like the mentorship or coffee chat requests, just to everyone that's listening, it always helps to, as Eliane was saying, not just look at that, oh, there's a big name, but also look at the human aspect. Like at least for me, it really bothers me when I get LinkedIn requests that have just write one line, just say, hey, I saw you, or I met you here. And it's because we humans are not medium publication. You're not just subscribe, it's like
that's so true.
No, actually, we unsubscribe. That's what we do these days.
I had this lovely person reach out to me once on LinkedIn, and it was this person took the time to actually say, I'd really appreciate it if you did this, and they gave this background. It wasn't just, here's my resume, slap it on. It really was like, hey, this person is taking the time and really does want something, right? Like you said, Michael, the business. What is your problem that you're trying to solve?
Yep.
And it wasn't just, bing, you're my LinkedIn friend now.
Yeah.
I think the mentorship is also confused with a long-term relationship, and I don't think it always needs to be. I remember having a call, it's like a 15-minute call with Heaton Shaw about some issues that we were having with our app. This was 7 years ago. And for 15 minutes, he just rattled off. And, I took 4 or 5 pages of notes. I followed up with an email. We never talked again. and I doubt he even remembers the call because this was like a thing that he used to do. But at the same time, it was incredibly valuable. I don't know if it was a formal mentor relationship, but it was, the conversation was the same that you would have with a mentor. It was a one-time thing, but it got us to the next level, and it gave us a whole book of action items to work on in the app. And even though it didn't go anywhere, it was incredibly valuable at that, to get us to the next step at that stage. So I also think like it doesn't need to be this kind of formal, heavy relationship. It can be very quick and fleeting even, and still provide a ton of value.
Yeah.
How awesome is it to go to the store, to the supermarket these days? Oh my God, the freedom, Lorraine.
Really? I just sent my husband.
Freedom! Oh my God, there's people. It's true, and you can get that. It's, you know, it's fleeting, but it does make an impact.
It's true. It's true.
It does make an impact.
That's so true. And I actually, I think, I don't know if you remember, Michael, but I think I messaged you like 8 months ago where I was like super stressed with something about DesignX, and I was like, I could just really use some guidance right now. You know, and now we're talking now after those 8 months. But that was, again, I had 15 minutes chat with you, or even longer, and it was a really, really helpful.
I'm glad.
So,
yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Like we spent quite a lot of part of our discussion on the early stage, because I just based on the questions, there are quite a few folks who are in the early stage of their careers that are watching the live stream right now. We will be kind of moving into the next stage. So we, in the last 15 minutes, can cover other parts of the discussion as well. But keep sharing those questions in the Slack group. And I'm sure there are a lot of other folks too, apart from, three amazing panelists who can also chime in and help you out. So talking more about the messy middle, and I'm again saying messy middle again and again because I just read a book called Messy Middle. It's just like that phrase is stuck in my head, which is all about, and it's by Scott Belsky. It had an amazing line which said, we as societies are always infatuated with beginnings and endings. When you look at startups, it's like, yeah, you raised Series A or seed funding. And then it's like, yeah, you got acquired. It's like same like career paths where people are like, wow, you started in, a non-design background and today you're a director or a VP. But it's like, there was a lot of stuff in between, a lot of those kind of not so conventional paths, a lot of different approaches and a lot of hard work done to kind of get there where you are today. So there are a few questions around, kind of that transition from your early path of your career to where you start to get a hold of, okay, this is the field. I think, Eliane, you earlier mentioned when you found design thinking and you were like, this is kind of where I really want to be. I want to make an impact. How does that, how do you arrive at that clarity? And is that purely emotive that you were like, yes, this is it, or were you like, or not you specifically, but generally, how folks, you're like, okay, this is trending. You try and look more analytically. How do you kind of arrive at that decision?
I point somewhere now, like I did, from my early stage. No, I think as you bob and weave, it's so true, the messiness of the middle, but that means we're old again. Come on. Am I at my end? God forbid. Now I feel like my mom. God forbid. So I think that, I think you kind of, you go through, it's like, again, I like making analogies, but you go through life and there's certain things you kind of, you accumulate. It's like, it's like this little train and stuff gets on it, right? And like you said, Michael, everything is like, it doesn't have to be this long-term relationship, right? And once you find something that you love, you may not stay there forever, but you're gonna hang on to it because it's something you really enjoy, like that whole passionate thing, right? I think it's very natural and organic, personally, from my own experience. Some people, it might be just, picking up a book or learning through mentorships or so on and having that path. I know a lot of my friends who are doctors and they became specialists because, they had these great mentors that actually, that's the reason why they went into that specific field. So I think that it could be that path. That's why you're like, after you've gone through all this stuff, you kind of hit something along the way and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then sometimes, you open that second door and you're like, you never even knew it was there. And then you're like, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And who knows what will come out of it after. I think progression is a really interesting concept because, I think in reality, I think we're always, it's that you said it so well, that beginning and end, and you don't really like enjoy the middle part. But I think every day you wake up and you have to enjoy the day. It's like your outlook of life, right? Enjoy those moments. Enjoy your kid running around with their pajamas where people are looking at you like you're completely crazy. Who cares?
That's
it's just like that middle part. Who knows what's going to happen next? You don't really know. You don't have a crystal ball, but so it's like fun. Of course, it's not always fun, but
it's challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So true. How do you, it's really interesting. You said fun, right? Like it is fun and you're kind of like taking it as you go. And for some folks, again, sometimes our brain tries to get more analytical and we're like, no, there's a formula. So let me dissect the formula, right? And there are a few questions around it too, which is more around like, is that the right time to kind of be more risk averse? Like, you kind of go with whatever you're getting, even in terms of like titles, opportunities, even the amount of time you put in, right? Like earlier, I don't know if we are all dating ourselves, but it's like earlier, the notion of designers would be like, you're working till like midnight, 2:00, you're perfecting your design, getting things done. And that was associated with, kind of putting in the grunt work to kind of progress ahead in your career, right? So again, different levers, I would say, could be the salary lever, could be the title lever. So how in your careers, like Maria and Michael both, like, because both of you had very kind of varied paths when you were in that messaging phase.
So for me, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I was kind of like, let's see what happens. And when it's time to choose my next job, I'll see what I do. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I didn't have any like very specific things. In 2009 to 2014, I kind of put my career on cruise control and I was like, whatever happens, happens. And that's because my husband also has a high demanding career and he said, now it's my time. So he moved us to Michigan in the middle of kind of nowhere and went back to school. And Michigan was not like the hotbed of jobs for UX. So I was there and I'm like, whatever, I'll retake my career whenever we're done with these and whenever you're done with your education. So it wasn't really a source of stress for me. And then in 2013, we decided to leave the United States and move to Toronto. And we came to Toronto and I happened upon a job and then I got promoted and I was like, this is fun. Leadership is fun. I guess I'll stick around with leadership. And I think after that, that's when I started becoming a little more intentional with my career and deciding where I wanted to go and deciding what mattered to me. Was it title? Was it money? And the reality is that I thought it was title. And then I realized it wasn't title for me. I thought it was money. And I know it's a very privileged place for me to say these. So forgive me for flaunting privilege here. But luckily for me, we're well positioned and my life is not an aspiration of just piling money and sit there and counting it like Uncle Scrooge. So I was able to start choosing jobs based on where I wanted to go next and what I wanted to learn and what skills I wanted to expand rather than do I wanted to keep progressing with my title or do I want to keep piling money on the bank? And that's where I ended up where I am. I realized that what I really liked was helping early stage companies form design teams and setting up processes and really like get things under control and going from, I'll use your friend, the messy to the more organized and getting functional. And that's how I ended up where I am.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's again, like since I've known you, kind of been my observation too. Like you don't care about the optics of the titles, and
No, you've seen I've
you've
gone
had
from
some
senior
really big,
director to group
yeah, group
director to
directors to
director.
yeah, and I think you're so passionate about the work that you actually get to do, or the impact that you can have. And titles is again something, when we are including me. Like I remember 6 years ago, like I was like, how do I get the director? Like you get fixated because that's what you think is what matters. Even did the money part, then left my job, came back to a lesser paying job, and was so much happier.
Me too.
So
Me too.
yeah. So again, I think maybe there is a little bit of, as you thankfully pointed out, that sometimes when we talk and people watching might be it comes from a place of privilege at times, which definitely is good to keep in mind. And then Michael, like I think you are like to what Maria was saying earlier, where she was on cruise control, and I think you were kind of like, no, give me more, because you're like two times founder, like, or taking on like founder opportunities or leading companies through acquisitions. So not some small feats.
Yeah, and well, I think, I mean, I've never worked at a company that had kind of a ladder of growth, a company large enough to have multiple directors and VPs above, right? And so
Right.
I do think at the early stage, people often optimize for that title. I think there's way too many designers right now who are senior designers with 2 years of experience, and it shows really quick, right? Like it shows, like even if your pixels are good, it's the decision making, it's the thought, it's the comprehension of the business side of the impact of your work. A lot of that is often missing. And so, when we interview designers, we get 700-800 applicants every time we open up a role at Dribbble.
Wow.
I don't know why designers want to design for designers, but they do. And so, but you do see this inflation of title, and because of the inflation, the title becomes less important. On the flip side, we've also, we've hired people who were CTOs at smaller companies or directors at smaller companies, and again, there's a gap in knowledge where the title existed, but the skills aren't there yet, and it becomes very obvious when you get into the day to day how green some folks are. So the titles become less important, and you start to look at the title plus the size of the company, or the title plus at least the company, where you may know the culture there and the expectations for that role, because that's really what matters. So I think it is important in the early days to optimize for skill, and not try to negotiate every title up, not try to become senior as fast as possible, because while that may be valuable to get an interview, it's not necessarily going to get you the role unless you actually have the skills to back it up. And spending the time to get the skills, the diversity of experience, is incredibly important in the early stage. I think that's what we've all done here, whether it's like bouncing around, or it's through a path at a single company, but taking on multiple roles within that company and growing. I think that's really the takeaway, is that all of those experiences added skills and allowed us to do what we're doing today. And it wasn't just negotiating for a big title. You actually have to be able to do the work. And we forget that today, in kind of our rapid pace, and we're always jumping from company to company. And it's easy to forget that there is actual real work to do beyond just negotiating salary and titles.
So
I think that is so true. And it's interesting too, because I remember moving from Montreal to Toronto, and everyone was like, what do you do? And I'm like, at one point I said, actually, I'm a cleaning lady, because I was like, dude, it doesn't really matter what I do. It's like, aren't you interested to know about me? Like my person?
Yeah.
The skill and the analogy is that skill set. I think that you're right. We are we are privileged to be able to say this at this point. But to your point is like, it doesn't really matter like what your title is as long as you like have that left and right brain, right? Have those two skills, and I think you'll be okay in life. I mean, I think you'll be able to progress naturally if you use those two sides of your brain, and don't think it's just that cookie cutter, like we've been saying as well.
Right.
It's not that cookie cutter, right? It's not just this, but have that. It's so true. Have that skill set. know what you're doing. It doesn't, those titles are so misleading in many ways.
So
It's the soft
misleading.
skills too, right? It's
Yes.
the people skills, the organizational skills, being able to navigate an organization, be able to get things done, be able to communicate your ideas, being able to pitch to a tough audience, being able to answer those tough questions, be able to know what those tough questions are going to be.
Be able to pivot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And add a dot. Look at us now. We're, all of a sudden, okay, let's just bang, ding. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I got off a plane from Brazil, and I'm like, I have to go into quarantine? What? So, have that ability to pivot, exactly like Maria and Michael were saying, is that it's so true.
Yeah, and like sales is an amazing way to learn how to, as much as it's not glamorous, but doing that type of work, you have to read the room, you have to think on your feet, and you're just pitching. It's just same as pitching a design. You're just pitching.
I don't know why you say it's not glamorous. I admire salespeople because I would
amazing,
never be able to do it.
I can't lie. If I can't play poker.
I can't either.
Terrible poker player. I'd be like, you don't want it? I understand it does not fit your needs. Right?
Same. I'm like, I get it. This thing doesn't do it. That's right.
Wasting your time. I'm like, Michael, you're way ahead of us.
Yes, Michael. We have so much to learn from you.
Will you be my mentor?
Just a coffee chat.
A 15-minute one. Don't be greedy.
This has to be the most fun panel, I think, of the entire week. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. We are coming close to an end, but there was one question that I really, really wanted to ask all three of you, which is, again, a lot of times when people look at the LinkedIn profiles, they look at the titles, and it seems very that there have to be some mechanics around it, right? Around just hacking my way up. What is one like big, you think, career? I was trying to find a synonym, but I'll just say like career fuck up. I don't know what other words I use.
Career fuck ups.
That you had, and then maybe you course corrected, but it's like through your journey from the beginning till the end, which you still remember, and kind of it could have had a good outcome. Maybe it was just about reverting it.
Look, for me, if you look at my LinkedIn and you might see maybe a couple short tenures there, it's because at some point, I don't know if it's a fuck up. I'll share a funny one after that if you want to. But that at some point I got sidetracked by things that were not, and I know it sounds very hippie, but I'm going to say it on like my values and what I really like look at. And I got sidetracked by either salary or by a title.
Yeah.
And I knew, like when you're dating somebody and you're like, I can fix them. But deep inside, you cannot fix them, and that's going to be a doomed relationship.
Love the analogy.
It's like a bad relationship.
But then you're like, but they're so handsome. I can fix them.
You're so good to look at. Oh my God.
Exactly. I can get over these flaws. I'll change you. We'll be good.
We'll be good.
So that you can change them. And you know what? You get tired of looking at how handsome they are.
It's a great analogy.
That's amazing.
Perfect. Oh, lovely.
Oh, my cheeks hurt. Michael, how do you beat that?
Well, I can't. But I do think that there is something to biting off more than you could chew. I've always been very cautious, but I've seen that really bite people, where they take that position that just they're not going to get there soon enough. end up getting laid off, and now you've got that red mark on your resume. I think that's something to be really careful of. But for myself, it's I mean, probably the biggest mistake was in managing founder relationships with co-founders. At my first company, we had 2 CEOs. We were co-CEO, 50-50 split, and it was a mess. We couldn't make decisions together. There was no decider. People didn't know who to go to, and in the end, walking away from that got very, very messy. And it took about 2 years to unwind while I was working at Crew, and that was a good lesson in separating work and personal relationships, and also having the hard conversations with whether they're your manager and the people you're working with, setting those expectations up front, or in this event, co-founders, where you have legal documents to go through. Setting those expectations up front and building productive relationships, I think, is key before they get to a place where they're irreparable.
So it's exactly, instead of a relationship, it's like a divorce in a sense, right?
Yeah.
You divorced the handsome one.
The handsome, yeah. Not so handsome, but I mean.
The ugly duckling? Are you serious?
I'm just kidding.
That's a sad story. I think Marie and Michael are so bang on. It's really it's either you try to change someone or you try to get out of the relationship. And or you bite off more than you can chew. Look, it's amazing how they all fit together.
Right. I do think there's an art to taking on enough work so that you're moving up, enough new experiences, and then there's a line that you cross where you're in over your head beyond. Like, you only have so much time to catch up in a new role, 3 to 6 months, right, before you're expected to be performing, and that's when I've seen people get in trouble, is when they can't catch their skill set up to the expectations in that time, and that's when you're looking at a layoff, or some kind of worse action, which I think actually hampers your career more than being able to choose your next step.
Well, it also gets set back emotionally, right? I mean, it's a
huge,
traumatic thing.
Yeah. I think back to your interpersonal skills, self-awareness is so necessary.
Yeah. Know thyself.
Know thyself, and just understand you have limits.
And moving into leadership, there's so many more soft skills that need to be developed, that you don't put on a CV, that don't show up in the job description, but are essential to success in the role. And I've seen that transition from IC to leadership really bite people if they're not ready for that.
I know Preet's trying to end. I'll just add one thing to that. That is an expectation I do set with my team, and it's in the career matrix, career ladder, whatever you want to call it. We have a whole section on interpersonal skills. So we start setting, like, how do you develop those as you move up?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Just so people start understanding. It is, because otherwise you can be perfect at the hard skills, but if you don't play well with others.
Yeah, the pixel, you can be perfect at the pixels. But if you that will only take you so far. Yeah.
So true. Amazing. We
we'll
already in our chat. No, in our chat, we're already getting comments. People are like, I don't want this talk to get over. So clearly, it has been one of the most amazing, entertaining, but also informative sessions of the week. And knowing the three of you, from our past interactions, like we didn't need quarantine for the human aspect to be, so forward. So I still really appreciate all of you, candidly sharing all the stories, and also keeping it amazingly entertaining for everyone.
I'm going to go shopping now.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria, Michael, and Eliane. Really, really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been a
you,
pleasure.
guys.
All of you
It
stay
was
well.
nice to meet you guys.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.